Hi, and welcome to our first virtual session at FETC. My name is Doug Konopelko, and I'm an education strategist for CDW-G. Today, we're going to be talking about how to adapt educational leadership in times of virtual learning. Quick background here. I've been a teacher, an assistant principal, worked at the district level, a little bit at the state level with an ed tech organization. And really, the biggest thing is that I always come back to this idea of being a connector, right? Connecting people, connecting ideas, having conversations that can help lead districts further forward. All right, so when we talk about adapting educational leadership, this is not something, right, that I just came up with on my own. As you may have seen back on that first slide, again, this was built with the leadership team from Clayton County School District in Georgia, right? So we had some conversations. They added some writing in here as well that really helped push the ideas forward as they actually exist inside districts right now. If you'd like to keep up with me, a great place to do that is always on Twitter. You can get me at dkonopelko, and really always looking forward to having conversations, driving connections, and really working with more and more people who are working in those school districts every day. All right, we're going to throw 2 minutes on the clock. Go over to the chat, take a little time, introduce yourself, tell me your name, where you're from, what you do, and your favorite app to use on your phone. Go! We have got about 1 minute left. Keep the discussion going. Thank you so much for participating today. And we're done in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you, everybody. Great discussion over there. Let's get back to it. All right, I absolutely stole this from Tom Murray, a good friend of mine. Always starts this idea with gratitude and positivity. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for everything you pour into those students each day. Thank you for leaving it all out on the table and just really working so hard to drive that change and make an impact with our students. So from the parents, from the community, from your teachers, if you're a teacher, from your students, thank you. This scene has become more and more common when we are talking about work, school, anything, right? Sitting behind a computer on a Zoom, on a WebEx, this has become the norm in our lives. So the art of leading looks vastly different today. For school administrators, for district administrators, this is a really common scene now. So they're tasked with adapting that leadership, all these leadership models that are built on relationships and are built on a system that was face-to-face. Digital tools have become the center of our worlds. While this is no easy feat, it does provide a great opportunity for leaders to adapt their practices and modernize some of their practices to work with these digital tools for communication and for collaboration. The 9 best practices that we're going to touch on today fall into 3 main buckets: supporting the work, upgrading the culture, and practicing self-care. When I spoke with the leadership team at Clayton County Public Schools, the school district in Atlanta that helped out with this is some of the things they talked about that really helped drive authentic growth in their leaders. Number 1, and I've got to say, quick caveat, in my house we've got 3 kids, 8, 7, and 3, so Disney is everything, right? We live our lives in these animated movies, so the first slide here, taken a little bit from Elsa, is to let it go. Now, I absolutely will not be singing today. That's best for both you and me. So you're welcome for not singing, but we do have to think about letting it go. So what does that mean in the context of what we're doing, of educational leadership? Well, we have to think that the whole world has changed around us, right? Not just the world of educational leadership, but one thing that we need to do is understand that there is a time and a place to hold on to past practices, and there's a time to let it go. So the reality is that school leaders, district leaders do need to do a little bit of letting go of their old leadership methods. They need to remember that now is the time to be flexible and maybe learn some new models. Going back to the way things used to be, that may not be an option for our leaders. All right, let's get 2 more minutes on the clock. And I want you to go over to the chat and throw some discussion up there about the topic that is currently on the screen. Thanks. We have got about 1 minute left. Keep the discussion going. Thank you so much for participating today. And we're done in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you, everybody. Great discussion over there. Let's get back to it. Number 2 is a practice we're calling fill in the blanks. And what fill in the blanks is taking some of these things that we naturally did face-to-face, that really face-to-face was the answer to all of these questions maybe, and taking time to figure out how do we fill in the blanks for all of these different things now that we are virtual. So again, this isn't going to be for every single thing that you do, but it's important to address the change in expectations that's happened over time, and fill in the blanks is a great opportunity to do this. What I would suggest is to not only focus on the things that are sort of die-hard, classroom-related, day-to-day operations of the school, but think about those ideas that are more on the SEL side of things, right? That socio-emotional learning, and think about Things like water cooler check-ins, right? People used to bump into each other in the hallways all the time. They used to, hop out of their classroom during their planning periods and be able to collaborate. So how are we recreating system structures and processes for that so that our teachers and our staff can continue to have the benefit of those in-between moments? When I talked recently to Cece Chung, who was the 2020 Hawaii Teacher of the Year, she mentioned the importance of these in-between moments and trying to bake them back into the classroom now that we are doing a lot more digitally and virtually, and how when you're trying to build culture and community, you really need those in-between moments. What I think we tend to overlook is that not do our students only need those, but also our staff and our teachers need the benefits of those in-between moments. Number 3 on the list today is some tips for some virtual meetings. Obviously, we all do see a lot of Zoom, Google Meet, WebEx, all these other tools, Microsoft Teams, and the list goes on and on. And I think that there are some things that have emerged as best practices for leading virtual meetings in those spaces. So, one is setting some kind of routine or schedule and sticking to it. Read a book recently about virtual meetings, and one of the things that it says is you should always start on time and you should always end early, right? I think people are always appreciative of not just the starting on time, but when you end and you give people a few minutes back in their day, can really be a positive experience across the board. Dr. Ebony Lee, who's the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction for Clayton County Schools, one of the things that she said when we had our conversation about this is that it's really important that all participants really understand the tools that you're using first before you start to really dive in deep. We used to talk about this in the classroom the same way, right? So we're taking some of those ideas that apply in the classroom, which is before you start just totally diving in with a virtual tool or a digital tool, making sure people understand, how do I get to it easily? Is there a sign-in process? If there isn't, right, what is that going to look like when somebody new needs to pop in? Just remembering that these things should be taken care of in advance and that we should be working within tools that people either are acclimated with or have some time to get acclimated to. Again, this is something that at this point I think has become much more mainstream, much more already well known, but still important to remember. Also, using a common collaboration space to upload those agendas and handouts so that they're immediately accessible during the meetings is really important, because we don't want people spending the first 10 minutes of a call looking for the information for that call. All right, let's get 2 more minutes on the clock. And I want you to go over to the chat and throw some discussion up there about the topic that is currently on the screen. Thanks. We have got about 1 minute left. Keep the discussion going. Thank you so much for participating today. And we're done in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you, everybody. Great discussion over there. Let's get back to it. Number 4 on our list is small groups and one-on-ones. So I think we all miss those big meetings that take place in a media center or in your auditorium where you get to see everybody's face. You stand at the door, you can greet everyone. Really great touch point for having those conversations with people. A lot of good in-between moments in those. But unfortunately, those same meetings, though they might have worked in person, really fall apart virtually. So it's important to be deliberate and intentional about what do small group and one-on-one meetings look like in virtual spaces. So, are we using tools that have breakout rooms available? Luckily, most of the platforms that we use have had the ability for a while now, or have recently at least added the ability for breakout rooms. So we're closing the gap there. But again, it's not just about having the breakout rooms. It's also about having norms and practices that surround them. Many of these platforms also have additional tools for collaboration, like whiteboarding, screen sharing. Got to find ways to take advantage of those as well, because those can be really important as we work through this work with our staff. Don't be afraid to mix things up a little bit and change the way that you've addressed small groups in the past. If it used to be that you always broke out just by grade level, maybe considering doing something to mix departments. Okay, this is really important because we don't have those in-between moments. We don't have that time where we can just bump into people. So if we're only focusing on the same PLC groups maybe that we had before, then we might be missing out on building that community and culture throughout our school or our district. I love this picture. I feel like this is how I've felt for most of the pandemic so far, most of the projects I've been working on. I feel like I want to be this guy who has just thrown all the papers in the air and said, that's it, I give up. But the real reason this is here is because learning, leading, it's all messy work. And we've got to take extra steps to make sure that we are making that learning visible, making that leading visible, right? We talk a lot over the last few years about making learning visible in the classroom. Well, we also need to make our leading visible. So when we talk about making learning visible for leaders, some of what that is just reaching out and collaborating with other leaders around your district to share relevant tips and tricks. April Mayo, who's the district director for instructional technology for Clayton County Schools, talks about doing this on a common platform helps people learn from others who are in the same exact boat that they are. With everything going on, there's been so many opportunities to learn from others, and that can take the form of webinars, more formal trainings. Really, almost anything can serve as a learning experience to help people continue to grow. All right, let's get 2 more minutes on the clock, and I want you to go over to the chat and throw some discussion up there about the topic that is currently on the screen. Thanks. We have got about 1 minute left. Keep the discussion going. Thank you so much for participating today. we're done in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you, everybody. Great discussion over there. Let's get back to it. This is probably my favorite picture that I found as I was researching this. Love this kid. Love the energy that this picture gives off. Really, though, what this is about is over communicating, right? So here we see that emotion, that excitement all over his face. I think it's so important in the work that we're doing right now to over communicate our successes. All right. Out there are people who are looking to either point out the things that we're doing wrong as leaders, the things that where we're coming up short as leaders. So what we need to do is make sure that we're telling our story, right? Dr. Beasley, who's the superintendent in Clayton County Schools, talks about because a story will be told about the work you're doing, a story will be told about your district, a story will be told about your school, and it's important that you are the one controlling that narrative, that you're the one that's helping tell that story. Because you're the one who has the boots on the ground, who's doing the work in the day-to-day. So we have to make sure we're taking time to over-communicate our success. If you've never used a social media platform like Twitter to start sharing out things like that, to start meeting your parents and your community members where they are, now could definitely be a good time to start. If you don't know how to get started, reach out to your staff, build a bridge there, and figure out who does know, who is active and might be a connected educator, who might be out there on social media sharing some things. And then the last thing that I would say here is to also make sure that you check any policies or anything like that that your school district might have before you do this. That way you don't find yourself on the wrong end of one of those policy discussions. As we continue, we see this big shift, right? This big shift key here. And what I want to talk about is expectations and the shift in expectations. So we already know that learning remotely is a big shift. Teaching remotely is a big shift. Leading remotely is a big shift. Doing these all amid a pandemic, amid a very turbulent year is a monumental shift. Expectations are not the same as they were before. What we need to make sure we're doing is laying out what the new expectations are. Each time we hit these milestones where your school moves from being virtual to being hybrid, from hybrid to having concurrent hybrid, which is, all students having the option every day of being face-to-face or remote. The biggest thing to take away is that we need to make sure we're not making assumptions about what expectations are in place now versus what was in place before versus what will the expectations be when it comes to evaluation time at the end of the year. We want to make sure that our staff has as many knowns as possible and as few unknowns as we can. All right, let's get 2 more minutes on the clock. And I want you to go over to the chat and throw some discussion up there about the topic that is currently on the screen. Thanks. We have got about 1 minute left. Keep the discussion going. Thank you so much for participating today. And we're done in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you, everybody. Great discussion over there. Let's get back to it. Number 8 is to stay connected, but don't forget to unplug. Right now, with everything that's going on, we are on our devices more than ever. We're checking emails more than ever. We have all different platforms that are up and running. All of them have their own notifications, their own messaging features. All of that is still vital and important, but I also think that it makes the time away that much more impactful for not just our staff and not just our students, but also for our leaders. So I urge you, I hope that you take and heed this advice, which is to stay connected and keep track of how your staff is doing, but also model that idea of unplugging, right? So nothing is worse than having somebody say, you need to make sure to unplug in an email that comes out at 11:30 at night, right? So make sure you're walking your talk, practicing what you preach, and take some time away from devices, away from notifications, away from blinking lights, whenever you can, to make sure that you're still focusing on those things that are most important. Doing this and also modeling this behavior can go a long way in helping educators avoid burnout. Finally, number 9, last one today, is acknowledging discomfort. So just like my girl that was planking on that table there, right? We all know that what we're seeing and what we're feeling and what we're going through right now is uncomfortable. So we need to make sure that we are saying that. Don't just assume that everyone knows and everyone feels it. Don't just pretend that everything is normal. Make sure we acknowledge discomfort. There was a study about fear that said one of the worst things you can do with fear is tell people not to be afraid. It actually negatively impacts their performance over acknowledging that fear and saying, we can move through this. You can still perform well. I understand that you're afraid. A lot of people would be afraid in the same situation, right? And giving people the feeling that it's okay to be afraid. So I want us to do the same thing with discomfort. I want us to acknowledge discomfort, not ignore it. When we talk to our staff, talk about how this is difficult. These are tough times. What are you doing to help? What are you doing with your family through these tough times? Rather than go on pretending that everything is great, that everything is awesome, to steal a song from the Lego movie, what can we do to help acknowledge discomfort, but then also help people move through it, right? And understand the discomfort and make sure people understand that it is okay and that you're there to help and you're there to help them feel successful through the discomfort. One thing you can do to help support your staff, to help support your students, is to make sure they understand what supports are in place. So if you're thinking about from a technology standpoint, you want to make sure they understand who to go to when they have technology questions on campus. If you want to talk about from an SEL or mental health standpoint, you want to make sure that your students know about your counselors, your staff knows about whatever programs you might have in place as part of their benefits for them to seek help if they need help as they are feeling burnt out, overwhelmed, uncomfortable, all of the rest of that. Those are totally natural. We want to make sure that we don't brush it off and dismiss it, but that we embrace it and help people move through. Last one, quick one here, bonus round. The other thing, and this is so important, right? While we're talking a lot about how to help our staff and how to lead our staff through these types of changes, we also need to remember that we can't help others until we've helped ourselves. So we need to make sure that we are practicing self-care, that we're treating ourselves well, and this takes many different forms. We could be talking about physically, we could be talking about exercising, eating right, getting sleep, all those things that help with our physical health. We need to find ways to prioritize those, maybe make it part of the whole family experience. Really need to get creative and make sure that we're still finding time to do those things because they're so important to avoiding burnout and to being able to be supportive of others. Again, we can't help others if we can't help ourselves. So this includes socially. How can we connect socially? Again, we're missing those in-between moments. So how do we create some of those in-between moments for ourselves so that we can continue to thrive, so that we continue to support our staff and our students? Finally, how do you unwind, right, at night? Is there something you like to do? Are you a knitter? Are you a DJ? Whatever it is, whatever you like to do, if it's a gamer, if it's reading, make sure that you're prioritizing that time as well, that time to unwind for yourself, because those are things that can really help, not just with you, but if you're in a better space, then you can be in a better space for others and continue to lead well through these times. Final thought, I will say that I talk to educators and administrators every day, and the most important thing to know is that you are doing great work and to keep up that great work, because you're out there going after it for kids, fighting for kids, and making sure that what you're doing is best for helping your students. And for that, I thank you. If you have any questions, we've also pushed this into EdTech Magazine as an article. I'll make sure to have a link to that. I'm here for questions in FETC's virtual world. So if you have any questions, if you haven't been putting them in the chat already, make sure you throw those in the chat. And finally, here's a few references. And again, if you want to reach out to me either here at FETC in the chat or on Twitter at dkonopelko. You can also get me via email at dougkon@cdw.com. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day. I'll be sticking around in the chat for the next 15 minutes or so. A couple other quick notes here. Again, if you want to reach out to me, you can get me at dougkon@cdw.com, on Twitter at dkonopelko. I also run a web series and a podcast called Focus on K-12. That information should be magically appearing on your screen right now. So if any of those things sound interesting to you, you can go ahead to the address on the screen, and that will give you links to all the things we just talked about. Also, all of the resources that we used in creating this presentation. So thank you again, and I will see you soon. Have a great FETC. Welcome to CDW-G's new podcast series, Focus on K-12, EdTech and the Education Experience. In this series, we talk to thought leaders in education about how relevant topics are impacting the world of educational technology and education at large. As educators, we must be intentional in our decision-making to keep the full experience of our teachers, staff, and most importantly, our students at heart. Together, we leverage the power of the incredible thinkers throughout the education community to discuss topics ranging from equity to esports, from creativity to coaching, and from feedback to the future of education. So let's dive in as we focus on K-12.
I really felt that there were stories that needed to be told. And I also felt like we really needed to refocus ourselves on what it was that was most important. When we look at the piece, a lot of times I think we've really pushed the envelope on things like data and testing and all that stuff. And structures have created environments where people have the pressure to feel like they've had to do that. But at the end of the day, our kids are not data points and test scores walking through hallways. How do we leverage the interests, the passions, the strengths? How do we make experiences more personal, more authentic in nature? And the title really came out of a way I would always phrase the question to educators as we would vision forward on how do we make learning personal and authentic? Because when we take a look at those kinds of examples, we're thinking about situations that are unique. And it doesn't mean there's not a time to stand in front of a classroom and address it. But when we look at things that are personal and authentic, it's really the experiential side that matters most. As a listener, think back to your experience that you had in high school or whatever it is. And typically the things that you remember, the things that are really ingrained in that brain of yours are often the things that were experiential in nature. And so with that,